What's up, YouTube, and welcome to the Ethan Standing and Rory Sitting podcast.
In today's podcast, we will be discussing Socrates' views on the forms, the divided line, and Plato's allegory of the cave.
First presented the idea of the forms when discussing the ideal city of justice and how it could exist
Get out!
if ruled by philosophers. As I was saying, the forms were first presented by Socrates through the ideal city of justice, and as he explained, the city could only be ruled by philosophers.
Although Socrates believed this, philosophers were not seen as politicians, and it made this hard for the public to swallow.
When people questioned this view, Socrates would explain that only a philosopher that had achieved true knowledge could ever rule the city.
Socrates believes that to obtain true knowledge, one must realize that knowledge and belief are powers distinguished by their objects.
Knowledge is the power that concerns what is, belief is the power that concerns what is and what is not, and ignorance is the power that concerns what is not.
Socrates further explains that objects of knowledge are different realms of reality, the forms that separate from the physical things around us. Objects of belief are what are around us in the physical world, things that are and are not.
You may be confused on how something can be and cannot be at the same time. One explanation of how something can be and cannot be at the same time is since physical objects are constantly changing, they are becoming what is and what is not. For example, the human body.
Another interpretation of what Socrates meant by what is and what is not is that knowledge is in the sense that it is always true, whereas belief can be true or false, therefore concerning what is and what is not.
If a philosopher ever achieved true understanding of these powers, they would find a deeper meaning for things like justice, beauty, and good.
Even if a philosopher could understand the true meaning of these powers, one might argue why a philosopher would want to concern themselves with the messy world of politics, and if they would want to rule such a city.
Socrates argues that what would drive and qualify a philosopher to run the ideal city is the understanding of the forms.
Beauty, justice, knowledge, belief, and most importantly, the form that is of the good. Knowledge of the good is a capstone of wisdom because without not knowing the nature of goodness, one could not understand what makes the other forms good.
To get a better understanding of the form of the good, Socrates compares it to the sun. Just as the sun makes the visible objects around us visible, the good makes all other forms intelligible to the soul. As the sun gives growth and nourishment, the form of good gives being to things known by the soul.
The form of the good is beyond being, dignity, and power, a type of superform that gives the other forms principle.
One of Socrates' followers, Glaucon, then asked Socrates to give a better explanation of these forms. Socrates then provides the explanation of the divided line and the allegory of the cave.
The first explanation provided is that of the divided line. The divided line helps us understand that the form of good is the first cause or principle. For example, the form of justice could not be without the form of good. Good is the highest principle in the hierarchy of the forms.
The physical things around us partake in these forms and are therefore images of the forms. At the bottom of the scale of reality is images of these images. For example, shadows, reflections of physical things.
Socrates asks us to imagine a line cut into two unequal parts, with each part subdivided in the same ratio into two unequal segments. The lowest segment represents the images of physical objects, shadows or reflections. The second lowest segment represents the physical objects around us, and together, these segments form the whole visible realm.
The second longer part of the line represents what we can know rather than what we can see. It is likewise cut into two segments. The first segment is what Socrates calls hypothesis, things we know on the basis of some other, more fundamental principle. The second segment represents the fundament of all principles of the truth on which all other truths are founded.
The form of the good plays the role of the fundamental truth, an object of completely certain knowledge that grounds all other knowledge. The second explanation provided by Socrates is that of the allegory of the cave. In this situation, Socrates asks us to imagine a group of prisoners are chained to the bottom of the cave. Behind them is a wall, and behind that is a light. There are more people behind the wall carrying puppets. With the lights, the puppets cast shadows on the wall, and the prisoners can only see the shadows of the puppets and hear the echoes made by the puppeteers.
Thank you.
No problem.
They are radically removed from reality as they can only see shadows from things that aren't even real. They very seriously engage in pointless games to try and identify and predict the movements of the puppets. This is a representation of our society and how we are the chained prisoners, and the various political debates and public affairs of us are like the meaningless puppet games played by the prisoners.
Now Socrates asks us, what would happen if a prisoner was set free? Ripped from their false reality of shadows, they would go kicking and screaming if dragged out into the sunlight. But once pulled from the cave, and after recovering from their dazzlement, they would finally see reality for what it is, this representing the philosopher.
Just as the philosopher can grasp the forms using the form of good as the principle, the prisoner could finally understand the true reality by the light of the sun. This explains why the philosopher seems useless and otherworldly in our corrupt society. The philosopher has no interest in our shadow games and second-hand images of normal folk. Meanwhile, normal folk have no hope of understanding the true reality of what the philosopher just witnessed.
Unfortunately, this makes hope for ideal justice seem very bleak, as we prisoners, duped by our second-hand images, will never welcome the philosopher to be our ruler.
Socrates admits the only way a philosopher could rule a real city would be if a philosophical-minded person who were born into royalty inherits the throne.
Another proposed problem is, what's in it for the true philosopher, as they would not have any interest in descending back into the ignorance of the cave.
Socrates admits it's not in the philosopher's interest, but they would not be selfish, and they would see that the demand of justice for them is to take hold of the city if possible. So it is with regret, but a feeling of duty, that the philosophers of the Republic should become kings.
In the end, it is ironically those who care nothing for power that should hold power. We hope you enjoyed today's content on Socrates' views of the divided line, the forms, and the allegory of the cave.
And to conclude this video, we'd like to thank you all for watching, and if you have any questions, please contact us.
This has been Ethan Standing and
Rory sitting.
Watch this, look. Alright, watch this, look. Ready? Shoes, no.